Well, namaste, like all of the speakers, and on behalf of all the speakers and all the participants, we'd like to convey our thanks to India Foundation, all of the sponsoring organizations, and most of all of you who have made this a success. Being a soft power conference, what I'd like to share with you, we've had phenomenal success with 2 books. I say that out of no vanity whatsoever. I think you'll be impressed as we go along, getting them into the public schools and influencing the American mainstream. That's why we were invited, because other than for our books, Mrs. Tarakia and I would be relatively unknown compared to some of the other honorable guests. But again, what I'd like to share with you in the Indic tradition is how we've done it. If it's any use to anyone, great. You find it of no use, do it your own way. But if you know, and I'm particularly will be talking about for writing for a Western audience, but for what I know of India, a lot of the parallels in the West apply to obstacles that you have here in India in wanting to promote religious concepts. So that's, again, if you know where the obstacles are and navigate around them, it can be very simple. Anyway, you may wonder, how did I get here? Gosh, over 50 years ago, I should have used tenor, right? But I didn't. Over 50 years ago, I got very interested in Indian art, architecture, and religion, and then was introduced to Raja Yoga, which really flamed the embers and created the zeal. And out of 3 trips to India in the 80s, late 80s, 90s, came the book. Oh, I guess I need to do this myself. Out of these first 3 trips to India for a year and a half, lasted a total of a year and a half, came India Unveiled about 3 years after it was published, and it was immediately received wonderfully in the U.S. I was giving a talk in a Hindu temple in Houston, Texas, Chinmaya Mission. I met Mrs. Smita Tarakia, who conveyed to me she would like to devote her life to helping with what we're doing, sharing the best of Indian culture and religion with the mainstream and educational systems. And I'd like to say for over 20 years, would you stand up, please, Smita? Smita, in the tradition of the, stay standing. In the tradition of the Indian woman, she's behind the scene, lets me have all the credit, and she deserves it. Without her, it would be impossible for me to be here today with her energy and talents. Editor-in-Chief of India Unveiled for over 20 years, associate photographer, illustrator of our multi-award-winning children's book. It'd be impossible for us to attain what we've attained in the West. It's a saying, behind every great man, it's a great woman. Being in a literary session, I'd say behind every successful author, trust me, it's a great editor. So we devote our whole lives lecturing. Anybody will listen, churches, schools, civic organizations, colleges, wherever we're invited. We do photo exhibits, publish articles, anything we can think of. But to me, what sets India apart from any other country on the earth, and before I get into that, I'm from the southern U.S. In the U.S., they laugh and tease me about how slow I talk and southern accent. So I caution our audience, you're going to learn new ways to pronounce Sanskrit words today, okay? So what sets India apart from any other country in the world, I'd say bar none, is the concept of Dharma. And a little boy taught me what that actually meant on my first trip to India, where I knew intellectually, but not really. And I was in Rajasthan visiting in Mount Abu, Dilwar temples to photograph them. And I'd lost my wallet, dropped it, buying postcards. I feel a tap on my shoulder. I turn around, outstretched arms of a little boy, 8 years, 9 years old, is my wallet. American fashion, oh, I was happy to get it back. Loads of money in it. Tried to reward him, he wouldn't take the money. So obviously he didn't understand, right? I stopped someone who spoke English, had him explain to the boy in his own language why I wanted to reward him for his noble act. Dialogue took place for a few minutes. I thought the man doesn't get it. Finally, the man said to me, the boy wants to be sure I understand that he thinks I should not pay people to do what's right, okay? Dharma. So that's the main story line behind our children's book. And again, schools love it. I'm pleased to say that I'm not doing that. I'm pleased to say the book's been translated into 3 other languages, Spanish, German, and while we're at this conference, we were notified the Portuguese edition has been printed. That will be for Brazil primarily, which very, very spiritual country, very, very interested in Sanskrit and Indian spiritual traditions. In fact, at this conference, we met someone who's going to translate the book into Sanskrit for us. And if anyone would like to translate it into another Indian language, let us know. Next slide, okay. Our most successful project has been putting the books into schools. Somehow the slides have gotten out of order, but in supplementing curriculum in schools. So the map in the US, the purple states indicate all of these public schools, elementary, middle, high schools have both India Unveiled and Finders Keepers. So both books are in 8 US, all of the schools almost in 8 US states. California, every high school has India Unveiled. State up Midwest, very conservative state. Indiana, all the elementary, many private schools have Finders Keepers. So all told, Finders Keepers is in over 13,000 public schools in the U.S. India Unveiled slightly behind in 12,000 public schools. And Smith and I identified many years ago that what we need to do is put correct understanding, correct thinking of Indian culture in the schools. Psychology, as you know, has shown what you learn first, it is very difficult to dislodge from the mind. So we wanted to teach the kids proper information, and then when they see this rubbish on Slumdog Millionaire, I hope I don't offend anyone who loves the movie, or other similar things, when they'll think, well, that isn't what I learned in school. So we have been very successful, as you can see from the map, getting the books in grassroots level. That's where change is. It isn't us and them. I mean, it's one, but they don't make the change. It's, you know, we need to do it at a grassroots level and go upwards, not have something vertically come downwards. Our only limitation, schools love both books. They've gotten great reviews in prestigious U.S. library journals that the schools use to determine the books. Our only limitation is funds. And that's F-U-N-D-S, not F-U-N-S, okay? We're a totally independent entity, get no support from any kind of, organization, a foundation, and I often like to say, if you don't believe in God, the success these books have had, the book is obviously something at a higher level of intelligence working rather than us. I hope, Smith and I, plans, our goals are to get it into every state in the U.S. eventually and other parts of the world. We need to go back one slide. Okay, so sharing the wisdom of Sanatana Dharma in the West. Suggestions, this is how we do it. Do it in a Western cultural context. Don't make it too metaphysical. The Western mind isn't metaphysically inclined. On the contrary, it's metaphysically challenged. So understand what your market is. I'm not talking about dumb it down. You don't have to dumb it down at all, but just write it simply. And if you can't write it simply, I think you need to rethink it at a deeper level. Frankly, I don't know how to say this diplomatically. I read some stuff on Hinduism and so forth, and I'm just talking about no wonder it didn't do well, or people didn't respond to it, because it, just wasn't written in a way that the Western individual could relate to, or more than that, we try to write it in a way that the Western audience can embrace it, not just understand it. Do it in a linguistic manner, not didactic. A quick example, need to keep moving. America's secular, of course, separation of church and state. We're doing finders, keepers, and deeper meaning of namaste, and we wanted to write what it meant. They don't want God stuff in the American schools. They don't want Christian God stuff. They don't want Hindu God stuff as such, meaning preaching, proselytizing. So all we did was, in the ancient Sanskrit language, namaste means the God in me bows to the God in you, my soul bows to your soul. Perfect, no complaint, no objection whatsoever, because linguistically, that's what it meant. And last of all, I didn't put it on the slide, very important point, don't threaten Jesus Christ, okay? And I mean that, I'm not joking. Just don't threaten him, and it's fine. The West is ready for the Sanatana Dharma, to me, in my opinion, if you do it in the following ways. We need to go back at least, another slide back, another slide. The 2 points to me that cause Hinduism the most problems in the West, in America, is Americans don't understand it's a monotheistic religion. In a conference once, boy, I had some monk jump all over me and try, oh no, it isn't. It's monotheistic. I mean, Brahman, call it whatever you want, go back in the scriptures and there's one unmanifested absolute from which it all came. So if you present it in a way that Americans, Christians, other religious groups can relate to and understand, it just removes so much misunderstanding. We explain, well, who are all the deities? All of the deities are what? Characteristics, qualities, or functions of God in creation. People can understand this. Sixth graders can understand this. And the other thing, this comment's mainly to the Indian audience. Please don't refer to your deities as idols. I know why you do it. We don't have time to go into the origin. The British, okay, what's the word for this? Oh, it's an idol. An idol in the Jewish and Christian scripture is a false god. I hear acharyas in the Hindu temples in America, we worship an idol. And that's saying to a Jew or a Christian, we worship a false god. Please don't ever use that word. Don't even translate it if you don't want to. Just say, what's it? It's a murti. And the word I translated as embodiment, and point out that this is not the object of worship. The object of worship is the unmanifested absolute that this represents in this form in creation, which cannot be limited to this inert object because the power itself is omnipresent. As I say, kids can understand that if you just explain it as such. Next slide. And this was showing the murti. I love this. This is outside of Kolkata, Saraswati, and the just faith of the student laying her school books there and the notebooks for the goddess's blessings. And I know we all agree if she studies, it's going to help a little bit. Next slide. And just have a couple of slides to go. I just thought I'd illustrate, and I've heard, seeming to me in the last couple of sessions, some frustrations from both panelists and audiences on putting Hindu terms into English. And of course, English is insufficient for the nuances of Hinduism. Everybody knows that. For one English word I read, well, ancient Greek language had 20-something words at least for that one English word. Sanskrit has over 40-something words for that one English word. So, of course, English is inadequate. But anyway, try to be inclusive and universal in your explanation of it. That's been our way. It's worked so well with the schools. And on that map, most of those states were southern conservative religiously and politically states, and they embraced the books because it's inclusive rather than exclusive. And so the way we show Om, this is in Darjeeling, Goom Monastery, thank you, trumpet being blown, which represents the Om vibration, God's creative, I wrote down our caption from India Unveiled, represents God's creative presence in the universe. Most religions have a similar sacred word testifying to the divine presence. Om, Om, to the, okay. To the Hindus, Hum to the Tibetans, Amen to the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Hebrews, Christians, Amen to the Muslims. So, of course, when you chant it, the vibration's the same. Om, Amen. Anyway, I again point out, sixth graders can understand this. Next slide. This is our last slide, and then just a few concluding words. This is in a temple in Assam, great example of two things. Murti, obviously they're not worshiping some inert metal Om symbol, but what Om, Patanjali said, what Om is a symbol of God, vibration of God. And so I would like to conclude with, in fact, just want to read our caption from India Unveiled, that the this represents God's intelligent, unseen presence in every particle of creation. Again, people can understand that. So in conclusion, I would just like to say India for millennia has been the guardian of divine truth, not just for those who are blessed to be born here, but for all of humanity. And just as has been the role of India throughout history to preserve and pass on the wisdom of the ages, Indians of the 21st century have the same global responsibility. People of the West know their civilization, our civilization, is spiritually bankrupt and is turning to India for guidance in spiritual direction. India's role in the 21st century is not to emulate the West, but to serve as a model for the world. A materially efficient democracy that is spiritually guided, which India is uniquely positioned to achieve these two qualities and combine it into its culture. By incorporating the wisdom of the past and being a gateway to the future, India will provide the world a new model of governance as our planet moves into a higher age. Thus, it's imperative that India's legacy always be linked with its cultural origin, which is uniquely distinctive, for it has a divine origin, unlike Google does not. Should that link ever be, and I don't mean that as any, Google serving the world beautifully, so I didn't mean that as any slight as to Google, but anyway. Should that link ever be severed and it become only a secular fad, India's timeless heritage would disappear into the sands of time. By honoring and reincorporating into society its divine origins, which pervaded every aspect of India's ancient civilization to include all of the arts and sciences, India's message to uplift humanity will exist throughout eternity. So in my humble opinion, the quintessence of Indian soft power is her spiritual heritage, although there's certainly many other aspects as well. But most notably, it's the Sanatana Dharma and the great yogic masters that this tradition has produced, which has given the world a step-by-step method to merge soul into spirit to attain moksha, the only reason every one of us are here on earth. And this is something the West is in dire need of today, and something of far greater value than the West could ever give to India in exchange. I'd like to conclude with the last couple of lines from the poem My India by Paramahansa Yogananda, considered a father of yoga in the West. These were the last words from his lips, speaking at a banquet to honor India's ambassador in the U.S. in Los Angeles, California. And his last words were, which represent my sentiments, that's why I use them: where Ganges, woods, Himalayan caves, and man dream God, I am hallowed, my body touch that sod. Namaste.